At the wedding altar, Sarah was about to say "I do" when her sister Emma stood up. What started as a perfect ceremony took a shocking turn when Emma announced her pregnancy to steal the spotlight. Sarah wasn't your typical bride. For months, she had suspected something was wrong, known for her attention to detail and intuition. When Emma declared the baby's father, Sarah had no idea she was about to expose a devastating secret. Sarah produced DNA results that would shatter the family forever. What began as a wedding celebration would become a reckoning. The family would never recover from the truth. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The alarm hadn't even sounded yet when Venika's eyes opened at 5:47 a.m., 3 minutes before her carefully programmed wake-up time. She'd been doing this for weeks, waking before the alarm, her mind already cataloging the day's requirements like a military briefing. Wedding day. The day she'd planned for 18 months, down to the minute. Her phone lay on the nightstand, displaying the meticulously crafted timeline she'd reviewed obsessively the night before. Hair and makeup at 8 o'clock. Photography at 10:30. Ceremony at 2 o'clock. Reception at 5 o'clock. Every vendor confirmed twice. Every detail cross-referenced against backup plans she'd developed for scenarios ranging from rain to family drama. Venika Emerson had built her career in marketing on the principle that successful execution required flawless preparation. Today would be no different. She slipped from bed without disturbing Marcus, who still slept with the deep, untroubled breathing of someone whose conscience was clear. The irony of that thought would haunt her later, but in this moment she simply appreciated his ability to rest while her mind buzzed with final preparations. The house felt different in the pre-dawn quiet. Sacred, somehow. This was the last morning she'd wake up as Miss Emerson. By tonight, she'd be Mrs. Rivera, partner to the man she'd loved since their junior year at Northwestern. The thought should have filled her with joy. Instead, a strange unease settled in her stomach, the kind of feeling she got when she'd forgotten something important, but couldn't identify what. Her phone buzzed, a text from her sister Emma. Running a little behind. Feeling awful today. See you soon, XOXO. Venika's jaw tightened. Emma was always running behind, always feeling awful, always needing special accommodation. At 25, Emma had perfected the art of making her problems everyone else's emergency. But not today. Today, Venika had contingency plans, even for Emma's particular brand of chaos. She typed back, "Hair starts at 8. We'll work around whatever you need." The response came immediately. "Love you, sis. You're the best." Those words should have warmed her. Instead, they felt hollow, like Emma's standard deflection when she sensed disapproval. But Venika pushed the thought away. Today was about love, commitment, and new beginnings. Her sister's perpetual drama could wait. By 7:30, the bridal suite at the Riverside Manor was buzzing with controlled activity. The hair and makeup team had transformed the spacious room into a salon, with professional lighting and mirrors that made everyone look ethereal. Venika sat in the central chair, watching her reflection transform, while mentally checking items off her list. "You're glowing," announced Patricia, the makeup artist, stepping back to assess her work. "That's the look of a woman who knows exactly what she wants." If only it were that simple, Venika smiled, accepting the compliment while her eyes swept the room. Jessica had arrived promptly at 8 o'clock, as expected. Her maid of honor was already in her robe, getting her hair touched up while fielding calls from vendors with the efficiency of a seasoned campaign manager. "The florist confirmed delivery for 1:30, Jessica reported, phone pressed to her ear. "Photographer will be here at 10:30 sharp. Everything's running perfectly." That's what Venika loved about Jessica Wong. 20 years of friendship had taught them to communicate in shorthand, to anticipate each other's needs without lengthy explanations. Where Emma brought chaos, Jessica brought order. Where Emma demanded attention, Jessica provided support. It was no accident that Venika had chosen Jessica as her maid of honor over her own sister. Emma finally swept through the door at 8:45, 45 minutes late, trailing apologies and excuses like a dramatic storm system. "I'm so sorry, everyone. I was sick all morning. Couldn't keep anything down." She pressed a hand to her forehead in a gesture that struck Venica as oddly theatrical. I hope I'm not coming down with something contagious. The room's energy shifted as Emma commanded attention through her distress. The makeup artist immediately fussed over her, offering remedies and sympathy. The hairstylist rearranged her schedule to accommodate Emma's late arrival. Even Jessica looked up from her phone, momentarily drawn into Emma's orbit of crisis. Don't worry about it, Venica said, though her voice carried an edge. Patricia can work with whatever you need. Emma's eyes met hers in the mirror, and for just a moment Venica caught something calculating in her sister's expression, but it vanished so quickly she wondered if she'd imagined it. You look absolutely radiant, Emma gushed, moving to stand behind Venica's chair. I can't believe my big sister is getting married. Marcus is so lucky. The words were right, but something in Emma's tone felt off. Venica had spent enough time in boardrooms to recognize when someone was performing sincerity rather than feeling it. But before she could analyze the feeling further, their mother Helen burst through the door with the focused intensity of a woman on a mission. Girls, let me look at you both. Helen's hands fluttered between her daughters like a conductor orchestrating a symphony. Emma, sweetheart, you look pale. Are you feeling all right? Venica, that lipstick color is perfect. Emma, maybe try some blush? You want to look healthy in the photos. And there it was, the subtle favoritism that had defined their childhood. Venica's achievements were acknowledged briefly, efficiently, before Helen's attention inevitably gravitated toward Emma's needs. It was so ingrained in their family dynamic that Venica barely registered it anymore. Almost. Mom, Emma's fine, Venica said. Patricia knows what she's doing. Of course, of course. Helen patted both daughters on the shoulder, but her touch lingered longer on Emma. I just want everything to be perfect for both my girls. The photographer arrived precisely at 10:30 as scheduled. Marcus joined them for the pre-ceremony shots, looking devastatingly handsome in his charcoal gray suit. But something was wrong with his energy. He seemed to avoid direct eye contact with Venica, and when he did look at her, his smile felt forced, overcompensating. You look incredible, he said, pulling her close for a photo. His voice carried just a note too much enthusiasm, the way people sounded when they were trying to convince themselves of something. Jessica noticed it too. Venica caught her best friend watching Marcus with a slight frown, her photographer's eye picking up subtleties that others might miss. When their eyes met, Jessica raised an eyebrow, a silent question Venica wasn't ready to answer. Emma posed for family photos with renewed energy, her earlier pallor apparently forgotten. She laughed at Marcus's jokes with particular intensity, touching his arm when she spoke to him. Normal sister-in-law behavior, Venica told herself. But Jessica's frown deepened. I need bobby pins, Venica announced when a strand of hair escaped her elaborate updo. Emma, can I borrow some from your purse? Of course. Emma waved toward her designer bag without looking up from her conversation with Marcus. Help yourself. Venica rummaged through the purse's contents. Wallet, keys, lipstick, breath mints, receipts. Her fingers closed around a small cardboard box, shoved deep into a side pocket. She pulled it out, expecting hair accessories. Instead, she found herself staring at an empty pregnancy test box. The world seemed to tilt slightly on its axis. Venica's mind immediately began calculating timelines, possibilities, explanations. Emma hadn't mentioned dating anyone seriously. She'd been single for months, or so she claimed. But the box was recent. The pharmacy sticker showed a date from just 2 weeks ago. Find what you need? Emma's voice came from directly behind her, causing Venica to startle. Yes. Venica quickly shoved the box back into the purse and grabbed a handful of bobby pins. These are perfect. But Emma's eyes had caught the movement, and for just a moment her cheerful mask slipped. She looked, scared, caught. The expression vanished immediately, replaced by her usual bright smile, but Venica had seen it. Great. Glad I could help. Emma's voice was steady, but she clutched her purse closer to her body. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of final preparations, but Venika's mind kept returning to that small cardboard box. A pregnancy test. Recent. Hidden. And Emma's expression when she'd realized Venika had found it. As Jessica helped her into her wedding dress, a stunning creation of silk and lace that had taken months to select, Venika found herself studying her sister in the mirror. Emma was animated, helpful, everything a sister should be on a wedding day. But now Venika was looking for cracks in the performance, and she was beginning to find them. "You seem tense," Jessica murmured, adjusting the dress's train. "Pre-wedding nerves?" Venika met her best friend's eyes in the mirror. Jessica knew her better than anyone. If Venika was acting strangely, Jessica would notice. "Just want everything to be perfect," Venika replied. It wasn't entirely a lie, but as she stood there in her wedding dress, surrounded by family and friends, watching Emma laugh with Marcus while clutching her purse close to her body, Venika felt the first whisper of a truth she wasn't ready to acknowledge. The perfect day she'd planned so meticulously was built on foundations that might not be as solid as she'd believed. The pregnancy test box was a question mark she couldn't ignore. And questions, Venika had learned in her career, had a way of demanding answers whether you were ready for them or not. Marcus's hand trembled almost imperceptibly as he lifted Venika's veil for their first kiss as husband and wife. The ceremony had been flawless, every word spoken on cue, every tradition honored, every photograph capturing the illusion of perfect love. But in that moment, as his lips touched hers, Venika felt something she'd never experienced before in Marcus's embrace. Distance. The kiss lasted exactly the right amount of time for the photographer, but it felt hollow. Performed. When they separated, Marcus's smile was radiant for their guests, but his eyes held a shadow that made Venika's stomach clench with unease. "I love you, Mrs. Rivera," he whispered, loud enough for the front row to hear. "I love you too," she whispered back, and meant it. But the pregnancy test box haunted her thoughts like a persistent melody she couldn't shake. The cocktail hour buzzed with congratulations and champagne toasts, but Venika found herself observing rather than participating. Her marketing training had taught her to read subtext, to notice what people weren't saying as much as what they were. Now, that skill turned on her own family like a spotlight she couldn't turn off. Emma held court near the bar, regaling guests with animated stories that seemed designed to keep attention focused on her. She'd changed into a form-fitting cocktail dress that accentuated her figure, or perhaps concealed it. Venika tried to remember if Emma had been drinking, but realized she'd only seen her sister with sparkling water or ginger ale. "You're analyzing." Jessica appeared at her elbow, champagne flute in hand. "It's your wedding day. Try to enjoy it." "I am enjoying it." The lie came automatically. "Just making sure everything's running smoothly." Jessica studied her with the sharp awareness of someone who'd known her since middle school. "Venika, what's wrong?" Before she could answer, Marcus appeared with 2 glasses of champagne, his smile brilliant and brittle. "Ladies, what are we discussing so seriously? This is supposed to be a celebration." The overcompensation in his voice was unmistakable now that Venika was listening for it. He was trying too hard, speaking too loudly, touching her too frequently. All the behaviors of someone with something to hide. "Just wedding logistics," Jessica replied smoothly, but her eyes remained sharp. "Everything looks perfect, Marcus. You should be proud." "Proud?" Marcus's laugh carried a note that sounded almost hysterical. "Yes, proud. Everything exactly as planned." He kissed Venika's cheek with exaggerated tenderness before excusing himself to check on something with the band. As he walked away, Venika noticed how his path took him directly past Emma, who looked up from her conversation to catch his eye. The look they shared lasted only a second, but it was loaded with something Venika couldn't identify. "Jess," she said quietly, "have you noticed anything odd about Emma today?" Jessica took a slow sip of champagne, buying time to consider her words. Define odd. She was late this morning. Claimed to be sick, but she seemed fine once she got everyone's attention. And Marcus. Venica trailed off, not sure how to articulate her growing unease. Marcus has been acting weird for weeks, Jessica said bluntly. Distracted. Guilty about something. I thought it was just pre-wedding nerves, but... But what? Jessica hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. I saw them together last month. Emma and Marcus. At that coffee shop on Pine Street. You know the one? They were sitting close, talking intensely. When I got closer, they separated quickly. Like they'd been caught. The words hit Venica like a physical blow. Why didn't you tell me? What would I have said? I saw your fiancé having coffee with your sister? It could have been innocent. Planning a surprise for you, maybe, or Emma asking for relationship advice. But the way they jumped apart when they saw me... Jessica shook her head. It felt wrong. Venica's mind raced, connecting dots she didn't want to connect. Emma's mysterious doctor appointments that never seemed to have specific times or locations. Marcus's recent habit of working late, coming home smelling faintly of perfume he claimed was from clients. The pregnancy test box hidden in Emma's purse like a secret too dangerous to acknowledge. I need to talk to Emma, Venica said. Now? At your reception? Now. She found Emma in the powder room, reapplying lipstick with the focused concentration of someone avoiding deeper thoughts. In the mirror's reflection, the sisters looked like bookends. Similar features, different energies. Venica controlled and composed. Emma vibrant and restless. Having fun? Emma asked, not quite meeting Venica's eyes in the mirror. Emma, we need to talk about what I found in your purse this morning. Emma's hand stilled on her lipstick. In the silence that followed, Venica could hear the faint sounds of the reception continuing without them. Laughter, music, the clink of glasses, celebrating a marriage that might already be built on lies. I don't know what you mean, Emma said finally. The pregnancy test box. The empty one. Venica kept her voice level, professional. Who's the father? Emma's laugh was too bright, too sharp. God, Venica, you're so paranoid. It was probably from months ago. I don't even remember buying it. The pharmacy sticker shows it was purchased 2 weeks ago. So? Maybe I was scared about something that turned out to be nothing. It happens. Emma capped her lipstick with unnecessary force. You're really going to interrogate me on your wedding day? The deflection was classic Emma. Turn the focus to Venica's behavior rather than address the question directly. But Venica had spent too many years in boardrooms to be misdirected so easily. Emma, are you pregnant? The question hung in the air between them like smoke. Emma's reflection in the mirror showed her struggling with something. Fear, anger, or maybe just the exhaustion of maintaining lies. No, Emma said finally, I'm not pregnant. Happy now? But her voice cracked on the word pregnant, and her hands shook as she shoved the lipstick into her purse. The same purse that had held the pregnancy test box, the same purse she now clutched like a shield. Then why do you look terrified? Venica asked softly. Because my sister is accusing me of God knows what on her wedding day instead of trusting me. Emma's voice rose, taking on the wounded tone she'd perfected in childhood. I can't believe you'd think I'd lie to you about something like this. It was masterfully done. The hurt, the indignation, the subtle accusation that Venica was being unreasonable. For a moment, Venica almost bought it, almost apologized and let the matter drop. But then she remembered the look Emma and Marcus had shared, the guilty distance in Marcus's kiss, the way he'd avoided her eyes all morning. Emma, she said, her voice carrying the authority she used in client presentations, I found a pregnancy test box in your purse. You've been having mysterious doctor appointments. You're not drinking at my wedding. And my husband is acting like a man with something to hide. So I'm going to ask you one more time. Are you pregnant? And if so, who's the father? Emma's mask finally slipped completely. For just a moment, her reflection showed pure panic, the look of someone whose carefully constructed lies were crumbling faster than she could rebuild them. Then the moment passed, and Emma's face hardened into something Venica had never seen before. Cold, calculating, almost cruel. You know what, Venica? Maybe this is exactly what you deserve. Perfect little Venica, with her perfect plans and her perfect life. Maybe it's time someone else got to be happy for once. The words hit like physical blows. What does that mean? But Emma was already moving toward the door, her earlier panic replaced by something that looked almost like satisfaction. Ask Marcus. Ask him about his late nights and his secret phone calls. Ask him why he's been so guilty lately that he can barely look at you. She paused at the door, her hand on the handle. Or better yet, keep living in your perfect little bubble. Pretend everything is exactly as you planned it. Some truths are too big for even your precious control to manage. Emma swept out of the powder room, leaving Venica alone with her reflection and the growing certainty that her perfect wedding day was built on foundations of sand. Outside, she could hear the band starting the music for their first dance. Marcus would be looking for her, wondering where his new wife had disappeared to. Guests would be expecting the picture-perfect moment they'd all come to witness. But Venica remained frozen in front of the mirror, staring at a woman who suddenly looked like a stranger. A woman who'd spent 18 months planning every detail of her wedding, except the possibility that the man she was marrying might be lying to her face. Emma's words echoed in her mind. Ask Marcus about his late nights and his secret phone calls. The pregnancy test box wasn't just a question mark anymore. It was the first thread in a tapestry of deception that Venica was terrified to unravel. But as she heard Marcus's voice calling her name from the reception hall, she realized she might not have a choice. 3 weeks later, Venica sat in her home office at 2 a.m., surrounded by evidence that painted a picture she desperately hoped wouldn't emerge. The honeymoon to Santorini had been a beautiful facade, Marcus attentive but distant, affectionate but hollow. She'd smiled for photos, while her mind cataloged inconsistencies, analyzed behaviors, gathered data like a detective building a case she didn't want to solve. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The hair samples lay sealed in separate envelopes on her desk. Marcus's dark strands, collected from his pillow while he showered. Emma's blonde locks, retrieved from the hairbrush she'd left behind after their last family dinner. The DNA testing kit instructions were spread beside them, clinical and precise. This was crossing a line she'd never imagined crossing. But Emma's words haunted her. Ask Marcus about his late nights and his secret phone calls. She'd tried. Oh, how she'd tried. But Marcus deflected every question with the skill of a practiced lawyer, turning conversations back to wedding stress, work pressure, anything but the truth. Venica could feel lurking beneath his careful words. Her laptop screen glowed with bank statements she'd accessed, using passwords Marcus thought she didn't know. There, highlighted in yellow, were the payments that shattered her remaining illusions. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, OBGYN, March 15th, $200. March 29th, $350. April 12th, $275. 5 payments total. All from Marcus's personal account, all to the same prenatal specialist. The dates aligned perfectly with Emma's mysterious doctor appointments. Venica's hands shook as she photographed the statements. The methodical part of her mind, the part that had built her marketing career on attention to detail, was already calculating timelines. If Emma was pregnant, and if these payments indicated Marcus was involved, then the conception would have happened around her wedding planning. While she'd been selecting flowers and tasting cakes, choosing between ivory and champagne linens, her fiancé had been sleeping with her sister. The pregnancy test box made sense now. Emma hadn't been checking if she was pregnant. She'd been confirming what she already knew. Working late again? Marcus's voice from the doorway made her jump. She quickly minimized the browser window, but not before he'd seen the bank statements on screen. Just catching up on some client work, she said, her voice steady, despite her racing heart. The Peterson campaign needs revisions. Marcus moved closer, his bare feet silent on the hardwood. In the lamplight, he looked haggard, older than his 30 years. Guilt, Venica realized, was wearing on him. Then, we need to talk. The nickname that had once made her smile now felt like manipulation. About what? About us. About... He ran a hand through his hair. the same hair she'd stolen for DNA testing. Things have been strange since the wedding. You've been distant. The audacity of it stunned her. He was the one keeping secrets, making mysterious payments, avoiding her eyes during intimate moments. But somehow she was the problem. Have I? She saved her work and closed the laptop, careful to keep her movements casual. I'm sorry if you feel that way. Don't do that. Don't go all professional on me. Marcus sat on the edge of her desk, close enough that she could smell his cologne, the same scent Jessica had mentioned smelling when she'd seen him with Emma. Talk to me like your husband. Husband. The word that should have filled her with warmth now felt like a trap. How long had he been lying to her? How long had Emma? I'm tired, Marcus. It's been a long day. But as she started to rise, he caught her wrist, gently, but with enough pressure to keep her seated. Venica, look at me. She did, studying his face like evidence. The Marcus she'd fallen in love with had been open, honest, incapable of deception. This man looked like him, sounded like him, but something fundamental had changed. Or maybe she was finally seeing what had always been there. Is there something you want to tell me? She asked. The question hung between them, loaded with possibilities. He could confess. He could come clean about Emma, about the baby, about the web of lies that had apparently been spinning for months. They could face this together, find a way through the devastation. Instead, Marcus kissed her forehead and released her wrist. Just that I love you, he said, more than you know. But his eyes couldn't meet hers as he said it. After he'd gone back to bed, Venica returned to her investigation. She found the business card for a private DNA testing lab that promised discreet, accurate results. No questions asked, no records kept. Perfect for someone who needed answers but couldn't risk exposure. The samples went into the mail the next morning. 2 weeks for results, the lab promised. 2 weeks to confirm what her heart already knew, but her mind refused to accept. During those 2 weeks, family dinners became exercises in psychological torture. Emma was radiant, glowing with what Venica now recognized as early pregnancy. She talked about new projects, new possibilities, her hand occasionally drifting to her still flat stomach in an unconscious gesture that made Venica's blood boil. Marcus was attentive to both sisters, but Venica noticed how his attention lingered on Emma, how he jumped to refill her water glass, how he asked about her health with concern that seemed deeper than brotherly care. The DNA results arrived on a Tuesday morning while Marcus was at work. Venica signed for the certified envelope with hands that had forgotten how to stay steady. Positive match. 99.7% probability that Marcus Rivera was the biological father of Emma Emerson's unborn child. The paper fluttered to her kitchen floor as Venica sank into a chair. 20 years of sisterhood, 6 years of love, 18 months of wedding planning. All built on lies so fundamental that everything she'd believed about her life was false. Her phone buzzed. A text from Emma. Family dinner Sunday? I have exciting news to share. Red heart. Venica stared at the message, understanding flooding through her like ice water. Emma was going to announce her pregnancy. At family dinner. In front of everyone. Another performance. Another moment where Emma commanded attention while Venica's world crumbled in silence. But this time, Venica would be ready. She picked up the DNA results and smoothed them carefully. Emma wanted to make an announcement? Fine. Venica had one of her own. The Wedding Revelation. Part 4. The Waiting Game. The DNA results burned like acid in Venica's desk drawer for 3 days before she could bring herself to look at them again. Each morning she woke, hoping the previous day had been a nightmare. Each evening, reality crushed that hope with the weight of scientific certainty. Marcus Rivera, father. 99.7% probability. The numbers didn't lie, even when everything else in her life had become a performance of deception. Thursday evening found her in the kitchen, mechanically preparing dinner, while Marcus worked late again. Another client meeting, he'd said. Another urgent deadline. The same excuses that had once seemed reasonable now felt like insults to her intelligence. Her phone buzzed. Emma's name on the screen made her stomach clench. "Hey, sis! Are you free this weekend? I need help planning something special." Emma's voice carried that breathless excitement that had always preceded her biggest announcements. "It's going to be amazing. Life-changing, really." Venica gripped the phone tighter. "What kind of special?" "I can't tell you over the phone. But I'm thinking Sunday dinner at Mom and Dad's. Everyone should be there for this." Emma's laugh tinkled with barely contained glee. "Trust me, this is going to be one of those moments the family remembers forever." The audacity was breathtaking. Emma was actually asking Venica to help plan the announcement of her affair, to be complicit in her own public humiliation. "Emma." Venica's voice carried warning. "What aren't you telling me?" "Oh, you worry too much. Just trust your little sister for once." The line went quiet for a moment, then Emma's voice returned, softer and more calculating. "You know, Venica, sometimes the best surprises are the ones nobody sees coming." The call ended, leaving Venica staring at her reflection in the kitchen window. Outside, suburban life continued its predictable rhythm. Neighbors walking dogs, porch lights flickering on, families gathering for dinner. Normal people living normal lives, built on truth rather than elaborate lies. When Marcus arrived home at 9:30, he found her exactly where he'd left her, standing at the stove stirring pasta that had long since finished cooking. "Rough day?" He kissed her cheek and she caught that faint perfume scent again. Not his cologne, not her perfume. Something floral and young and desperately familiar. Emma's perfume. Fine. She dumped the overcooked pasta into the colander, watching the water spiral down the drain. "How was your meeting?" "Productive." The lie came so easily she wondered how many others she'd missed. "Johnson wants to restructure the entire contract. Means more late nights, unfortunately." Johnson. She'd call his office tomorrow, just to see if there had actually been a meeting. Another data point in her growing case file of betrayal. "Emma called," she said, watching his reflection in the kitchen window. "She wants to plan something special for Sunday dinner. A family announcement." Marcus went very still behind her. In the window's reflection, she saw his face cycle through emotions. Surprise, fear, something that looked almost like relief. Did she say, what kind of announcement? The careful neutrality in his voice confirmed everything. He knew. Of course he knew. He'd probably been planning this moment with Emma, choreographing their revelation while Venica planned their wedding. She said it would be life-changing. Venica turned to face him directly. Any idea what that might mean? For a moment, she thought he might confess. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. She could see the war playing out behind his eyes. Guilt battling self-preservation, truth fighting lies. Self-preservation won. "No idea," he said. "You know Emma. Everything's dramatic with her." That night, Venica lay awake, listening to Marcus's breathing, studying the man she'd promised to love in sickness and health, for better or worse. The irony wasn't lost on her. Their marriage vows had prepared them for external challenges, not for the rot that could grow from within. At 3 a.m., she slipped from bed and returned to her office. The DNA results lay exactly where she'd left them, clinical and devastating. But now she had a plan. Sunday dinner. Emma's big announcement. The moment when lies would finally meet truth in front of the entire family. Venica opened her laptop and began typing, her fingers moving with the precision of someone who'd finally found her purpose. If Emma wanted a memorable announcement, she'd get one. But Venica would be controlling the narrative this time. She printed multiple copies of the DNA results, sealed them in individual envelopes, and labeled each one with a family member's name. Mom, Dad, Grandmother Lily. Jessica would get her copy separately. She'd earned the right to hear the truth first. Emma wanted to destroy Venica's life in front of everyone she loved? Fine. But she'd learned that Venica Emerson had spent her entire career crafting presentations that changed minds and shifted power. This would be her masterpiece. The laptop screen glowed in the darkness as she refined her strategy, planned her timing, prepared for war. Emma had spent months orchestrating this betrayal. Venica had 3 days to orchestrate its exposure. Sunday dinner at the Emerson house had always followed the same comfortable ritual. Helen's pot roast, David's careful carving, polite conversation about work and weather, while the family gathered around the oak table that had witnessed decades of celebrations and milestones. Tonight felt different, electric with anticipation that made Venica's skin crawl. Emma fairly vibrated with excitement, her cheeks flushed and eyes bright as she helped their mother set the table. She'd dressed carefully for her big moment, a flowing emerald dress that would accommodate her growing belly, while accentuating the glow everyone would soon attribute to impending motherhood. Marcus sat rigidly beside Venica, his usual ease replaced by nervous energy that manifested in drumming fingers and darting glances toward Emma. He knew what was coming. They'd planned this together, choreographed their moment while Venica lived in ignorance. But not anymore. The sealed envelopes in Venica's purse felt heavy as lead. DNA results for each family member, carefully labeled and waiting for the perfect moment. She'd rehearsed this like a client presentation, planned every word, anticipated every reaction. "You seem tense, dear," Grandmother Lily observed, her sharp eyes studying Venica from across the table. At 82, Lily Emerson still possessed the keen awareness that had helped her build the family's financial foundation. "Everything all right with you newlyweds?" "Perfect," Venica replied, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. "Just looking forward to whatever Emma wants to share with us." Emma's smile stretched wider, predatory in its satisfaction. "Oh, it's going to be wonderful, life-changing for everyone." The conversation continued through the meal. David discussing his latest engineering project, Helen fussing over everyone's plates, Lily sharing neighborhood gossip with the precision of a war correspondent. Normal family dynamics playing out while betrayal sat at the table like an uninvited guest. When Helen brought out dessert, Emma's favorite chocolate cake, Venica noted with bitter irony. Emma stood and tapped her water glass with theatrical flourish. "I hope everyone's ready for some exciting news," she announced, her voice carrying the practiced projection of someone who'd rehearsed this moment. "I have something incredible to share with the family." "Here it comes," Venica thought, her hand moving to her purse, the performance Emma had been building toward for months. "I'm pregnant!" Emma's announcement exploded into the dining room like a firework. "I'm going to have a baby!" The reaction was immediate and exactly what Emma had orchestrated. Helen gasped and pressed her hands to her heart. David looked up from his coffee with surprise and growing pleasure. Grandmother Lily's eyebrows rose with interest rather than shock. She'd probably suspected weeks ago. "Oh, sweetheart." Helen was on her feet instantly, pulling Emma into an embrace. "This is wonderful news. When are you due? Who's the father? Why didn't you tell us sooner?" Emma basked in the attention, her smile radiant as she fielded questions with practiced evasion. "It's still early, about 12 weeks. I wanted to wait until I was sure everything was healthy before sharing the news." "But who's the father?" Lily's question cut through the celebration with surgical precision. "You haven't mentioned dating anyone seriously." For just a moment, Emma's mask slipped. Her eyes flicked toward Marcus, who had gone pale as morning fog. The look between them lasted barely a second, but it confirmed everything Venica had suspected. "That's complicated," Emma said, her voice taking on the wounded tone she'd perfected in childhood. "He's not ready to be public about our relationship yet, but he's committed to supporting me and the baby." The lies flowed like poisoned honey. Venica watched her family absorb Emma's story, saw their faces soften with sympathy for her sister's difficult situation. Even David, usually skeptical of Emma's dramatics, looked genuinely moved by her apparent vulnerability. "Well, whoever he is, he's a lucky man," Helen declared, tears streaming down her cheeks. "And this baby will be so loved." "Right, Venica? You're going to be an aunt." All eyes turned to Venica, expecting joy, congratulations, sisterly support. Instead, they found something that made the room's temperature drop 10 degrees. "Actually," Venica said, standing slowly and reaching into her purse, I think we should discuss exactly who the father is. Emma's face went white. Venica, what are you? Because I know exactly who he is. Venica pulled out the first envelope, her movements deliberate and controlled. And I have DNA evidence to prove it. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the grandfather clock in the hallway seemed to stop ticking as the family processed her words. DNA evidence? David's engineering mind immediately grasped the implications. Venica, what are you saying? Instead of answering, she opened the envelope and pulled out the laboratory results. The official letterhead, the clinical language, the devastating conclusion printed in black and white. I'm saying that the father of Emma's baby is Marcus Rivera, my husband. Her voice remained steady, professional, as if she were presenting quarterly earnings rather than destroying her family. Probability of paternity, 99.7%. Marcus shot to his feet so fast his chair toppled backward. Venica, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. She turned to face him, and the fury in her eyes made him step backward. I understand that while I was planning our wedding, you were sleeping with my sister. I understand that you've been paying for her prenatal appointments. I understand that everything about our marriage is built on lies. Emma's performance crumbled completely. Gone was the glowing mother-to-be, replaced by something desperate and cornered. It's not what you think. We never meant for this to happen. You never meant to get caught. Venica began distributing envelopes to each family member with the efficiency of a court clerk serving subpoenas. Mom, Dad, Grandmother Lily, here's your copy of the DNA results. I thought you should all know exactly what kind of celebration we're having. Helen stared at her envelope as if it contained anthrax. Venica, surely there's been some mistake. The only mistake was trusting them. Venica's voice finally cracked, letting fury bleed through her professional composure. The only mistake was believing that my sister and my husband were capable of basic human decency. David opened his envelope and read with the methodical attention he gave engineering blueprints. When he looked up, his face had hardened into something Venica had rarely seen. Pure paternal rage. Is this true? His question was directed at Marcus, but his tone could have cut steel. Marcus opened his mouth, closed it, then made the fatal mistake of trying to explain rather than apologize. David, I can explain. It wasn't planned. Emma and I, we have a connection. David's fist connecting with Marcus's jaw cut off the explanation mid-sentence. As Marcus stumbled backward, clutching his face, the dining room erupted into chaos. Helen was sobbing. Emma was screaming about stress and the baby. Grandmother Lily sat in stunned silence, staring at the DNA results as if they were written in a foreign language. But through it all, Venica felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Relief. The truth was finally out, burning like acid through the lies that had poisoned her life. The perfect family dinner was destroyed, the careful facades shattered beyond repair. And for the first time since finding that pregnancy test box, Venica could breathe. The Wedding Revelation, Part 6. The aftermath unfolds. The silence in Venica's house at 3 a.m. was so complete, it felt like death. She sat in her living room, still wearing the dress she'd chosen for what was supposed to be a celebratory family dinner, watching Marcus's blood stain the white fabric where he'd reached for her, as David's punch sent him reeling. He'd tried to explain, of course. They always tried to explain. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. We never meant to hurt you. It just developed over time. The same cliches every cheater had used since the beginning of time, as if infidelity became acceptable when dressed in familiar words. But the explanations had died when Jessica arrived. Venica had called her from the chaos of her parents' dining room, speaking in the clipped tones of someone in shock. Jessica had taken one look at the scene, Marcus bleeding, Emma hysterical, Helen trying to restore order to a situation that had moved far beyond her control, and made executive decisions. Venica, we're leaving. Now. They'd driven in silence to Venica's house, where Jessica had helped her change the locks while Marcus was presumably at the emergency room getting his jaw examined. By the time he returned, his key no longer worked, and his suitcases sat on the front porch like abandoned luggage. Now, 12 hours later, Venika's phone buzzed constantly, with calls she didn't answer, and texts she deleted without reading. Her carefully constructed life had imploded in spectacular fashion, and everyone wanted front-row seats to the aftermath. The doorbell rang at 7 a.m. Through the peephole, she saw her mother's familiar silhouette, shoulders hunched with the weight of family catastrophe. Helen had always prided herself on maintaining appearances, on being the kind of mother whose children never caused public scenes. Last night had shattered that illusion along with everything else. "Venika, please, we need to talk." Helen's voice carried through the door, thick with tears and exhaustion. "This whole thing is it's a misunderstanding that got out of hand. A misunderstanding." As if 8 months of systematic betrayal could be dismissed as a simple miscommunication. "Go home, Mom." Venika's voice was steady, empty of emotion. "There's nothing to discuss." "But Emma's pregnancy. She's having complications. The stress from last night, the shock. She's in the hospital." Of course she was. Emma's greatest talent had always been transforming consequences into sympathy, making her problems everyone else's emergency. How convenient that her body had found a way to make Venika look like the villain in her own betrayal story. "That's unfortunate," Venika replied. "But it doesn't change anything. She could lose the baby." The words hung in the air like an accusation. Helen was using Emma's medical crisis as a weapon, trying to guilt Venika into forgiveness through the threat of tragedy. It was manipulation so transparent that Venika almost laughed. "Then maybe she should have thought about that before sleeping with my husband." Helen's sharp intake of breath was audible even through the door. "Venika Marie Emerson, I raised you better than this. Family comes first. Always. Family." Venika repeated the word like it tasted bitter. "Is that what we're calling betrayal now?" The conversation ended with Helen's retreating footsteps and Venika's growing understanding that the fracture lines in her family ran deeper than anyone had imagined. Her mother's response revealed everything. Faced with choosing between her daughters, Helen had instinctively protected the one who appeared more vulnerable, regardless of who was actually the victim. By noon, the calls from Marcus's family began. His mother, Patricia Rivera, had always treated Venika with polite reserve, the kind of careful distance that suggested she'd never quite approved of her son's choice. Now that reserve had transformed into open hostility. "How dare you humiliate my son in public?" Patricia's voice crackled through the phone before Venika could speak. "Airing family business like some trashy reality show. Marcus made a mistake, but you've made it 100 times worse." "A mistake?" Venika's laugh held no humor. "Is that what we're calling 8 months of adultery with my sister? Men stray sometimes. It's unfortunate, but it happens. The mature response is to work through it privately, not destroy everyone's reputation with public displays." The casual dismissal of betrayal as inevitable male behavior revealed everything about the Rivera family's values. No wonder Marcus had felt entitled to take what he wanted without considering the consequences. "Your son is welcome to work through his mistakes with someone else," Venika said. "Our marriage is over. You're making a decision you'll regret. Marcus is a good man from a good family. You won't find better." The call ended with threats of legal action over the defamatory DNA evidence, as if scientific proof could somehow constitute slander. Marcus's family was circling the wagons, preparing to rewrite history so their golden boy emerged as the victim of Venika's unreasonable expectations. But it was Jessica's visit that evening that broke through Venika's protective numbness. Her best friend arrived with takeout Chinese food and a bottle of wine, settling into the living room as if staging an intervention. "Okay," Jessica said, unpacking containers with military efficiency. "Talk to me. How are you actually doing?" "Fine." The automatic response came without thought. "Bullshit." Jessica's tone was gentle but implacable. "Your husband cheated with your sister, got her pregnant, and you exposed it all at Sunday dinner. Fine isn't an option right now." For the first time since the revelation, Venika felt her carefully maintained control beginning to crack. I don't know how to feel, she admitted. I should be devastated. I should be crying and eating ice cream and planning my revenge. But mostly I just feel empty. That's shock, Jessica said quietly. Your brain is protecting you from the full impact until you're ready to process it. When will I be ready? When you're ready. Could be tomorrow, could be months from now. Trauma doesn't follow a schedule. They ate in comfortable silence. Two women who'd weathered enough of life's storms to understand that some wounds required time to reveal their true depth. Outside, suburban life continued. Neighbors walking dogs, families gathering for dinner, couples who still believed in happily ever after. The worst part, Venica said finally, is that I planned everything so carefully. The wedding, the marriage, our future together. I had contingency plans for everything, except the possibility that the people I trusted most were lying to my face. Jessica reached across the coffee table and squeezed her hand. You couldn't have planned for this because you're not capable of this level of betrayal. Your mistake was assuming everyone shared your moral code. As night fell and Jessica departed, Venica found herself alone with the ruins of her carefully constructed life. Tomorrow would bring lawyers and paperwork, the systematic dismantling of a marriage that had been dead for months without her knowledge. The Wedding Revelation, Part 7, False Reconciliation. The call came at 4 a.m. on Tuesday, jarring Venica from the first real sleep she'd managed in days. Helen's voice cracked through the phone, raw with panic and exhaustion. Emma's bleeding. We're at Memorial Hospital. The doctors. They're not sure if the baby... Helen's sob cut through the pre-dawn silence like a blade. Venica, please. She's asking for you. The irony wasn't lost on her. After months of systematic betrayal, Emma's first instinct in crisis was to reach for the sister she'd destroyed. But guilt was a powerful weapon, and Helen wielded it with surgical precision. She needs her family right now. Whatever happened between you girls, this baby is innocent. Venica sat in her darkened bedroom, phone pressed to her ear, wrestling with emotions she couldn't untangle. Anger warred with ingrained protectiveness. Betrayal battled with genuine concern. Emma might be a manipulator, but she was also 25 years old and potentially losing a pregnancy. I'll be there in an hour, she said finally. Memorial Hospital's maternity ward at dawn felt like a purgatory designed specifically for family crises. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in harsh relief. The waiting room held the scattered remnants of the Emerson family. Helen clutching tissues, David staring at his phone, Marcus pacing like a caged animal with his jaw still swollen from David's punch. Thank God you came. Helen rushed toward her, eyes red-rimmed and desperate. The doctors say the next few hours are critical. Emma's been asking for you constantly. Marcus looked up as Venica entered, his expression cycling through relief, guilt, and something that might have been hope. Then, I'm so glad you're here. Emma needs... Don't. Her voice cut through his attempt at reconciliation with clinical precision. I'm here for Emma and the baby. Not for you. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the same OBGYN whose name had appeared on Marcus's secret payment records, emerged from Emma's room looking professionally concerned. The irony of meeting her like this, in crisis rather than deception, wasn't lost on Venica. Are you the sister? Dr. Mitchell's tone was carefully neutral. Emma's been asking for you. She's stable for now, but the next 12 hours will tell us whether we can save the pregnancy. The word save hung in the air, loaded with implications that made everyone shift uncomfortably. Emma had weaponized this pregnancy, used it to steal another woman's husband, and now they were all supposed to unite in saving it. But when Venica entered the hospital room and saw Emma, pale, fragile, genuinely terrified rather than performing for an audience, something fundamental shifted in her chest. This wasn't the calculating manipulator from Sunday dinner. This was a scared young woman facing the potential loss of something she'd apparently wanted desperately enough to destroy her family for. Venica? Emma's voice was barely a whisper. I'm so sorry. I'm so fucking sorry for everything. The profanity was jarring coming from someone who usually curated her words so carefully. Emma's mask had finally cracked completely. revealing someone raw and desperate underneath. "The doctors say I might lose the baby." Emma's hand moved to her still flat stomach with protective instinct. "And all I can think about is how I don't deserve to keep it after what I did to you." It was the first genuine thing Emma had said in months, maybe years. No manipulation, no victim narrative, just stark acknowledgement of her own culpability. "Emma." Venica moved closer to the bed, her anger temporarily displaced by something that felt dangerously like forgiveness. "I know you hate me. I know you have every right to hate me." Emma's tears were different now. Not the calculated displays she'd perfected, but genuine anguish. "But this baby, it's not just mine. It's part of you too in a weird way. Your family." The twisted logic was vintage Emma, but underneath it lay a truth that Venica couldn't ignore. This child would carry Emerson DNA, would be connected to their family regardless of the circumstances of its conception. Helen appeared in the doorway, hope blooming across her features as she witnessed what looked like reconciliation. "See? This is what family does. We come together during crisis." But Marcus's arrival shattered the fragile moment. He entered carrying flowers and coffee, playing the devoted partner role with the same hollow enthusiasm he'd brought to their marriage. "How is she? How's the baby?" His concern seemed genuine, but Venica recognized the performance now. Marcus cared about Emma, maybe even loved her, but he also loved the drama of being needed, the romance of forbidden love, the excitement of deception. What he'd never loved was accountability. "The baby's stable," Emma said, accepting his kiss with less enthusiasm than Venica expected. Crisis had apparently clarified some things for Emma, too. Dr. Mitchell returned with test results and cautious optimism. The bleeding had stopped. The baby's heartbeat was strong. With bed rest and careful monitoring, the pregnancy could continue safely. The collective sigh of relief filled the room, but Venica noticed how quickly the family dynamics reasserted themselves. Helen immediately began planning care schedules. David offered financial support for medical expenses. Marcus started discussing time off work to help with Emma's recovery. Everyone's sliding back into their familiar roles as if Sunday's explosion had never happened. "This changes things," Helen announced with the authority of a family matriarch. "We need to focus on what's important now. The past is the past." But Venica understood that this crisis had been Emma's salvation, not her redemption. The family was rallying around the pregnancy because it was easier than facing the betrayal that had created it. As she watched her family orchestrate Emma's recovery, Venica realized that she was the only one who seemed to understand the difference between healing and enabling. Part 9. The divorce papers arrived on a Thursday morning, delivered to Marcus at her parents' house where he'd apparently taken up permanent residence. Venica knew this because Helen called within an hour, her voice shrill with panic. "You can't be serious about this. Marcus is devastated. Emma's having complications from the stress." Of course Emma was having complications. Every inconvenience in Emma's life became a medical emergency. Every consequence of her actions transformed into someone else's responsibility. "The papers are already filed, Mom. This isn't a negotiation." "But the house, your beautiful house, you're just going to throw it all away?" Venica stood in her hotel room looking out at the city skyline. She'd been living here for 3 weeks now, and the sterile efficiency of it felt like freedom compared to the suffocating warmth of family expectation. "It was never my house. It was our house. And there is no our anymore." The real estate agent had been brutally honest about the market timing, but Venica didn't care about maximizing profit. She cared about cutting ties cleanly, completely. The house would sell below market value, but it would sell quickly. Marcus would get his half of the proceeds, and she would get her independence. Helen was still talking, her words blending into the familiar rhythm of guilt and manipulation. "Emma keeps asking when you're coming to visit. She says the baby hasn't been moving as much since you stopped coming around." Even from a distance, Emma was trying to weaponize her pregnancy, to make Venica responsible for an unborn child's welfare. The manipulation was so transparent it was almost insulting. "Mom, I need you to hear something very clearly. I am not coming back. I am not reconciling with Emma. I am not playing happy families with my ex-husband and his pregnant girlfriend. That part of my life is over. She's not his girlfriend. She's what? His wife? His partner? The mother of his child? Venika's voice remained steady despite the anger building behind it. She's the woman he was sleeping with while he was engaged to me. That's what she is. That's what she'll always be. The silence stretched between them, filled with everything Helen couldn't say. That she knew Venika was right, that the situation was indefensible, that choosing Emma meant losing Venika entirely. Your father wants to talk to you, Helen said finally, the fight draining from her voice. Tell Dad I love him. Tell him I'm building something better than what I lost. After hanging up, Venika sat in the growing darkness of her hotel room, feeling the strange peace that came with burning bridges completely. There would be no gradual reconciliation, no tentative rebuilding of relationships. She had chosen scorched earth, and it was surprisingly liberating. Her phone buzzed with a text from her lawyer. House showing went well. 3 offers expected by Monday. Another text followed immediately, this one from an unknown number. This is Emma. Mom gave me your new number. I went into early labor last night. I'm okay, and so is the baby. But I wanted you to know. I keep hoping you'll want to meet your nephew when he arrives. Your nephew. Even now, even after everything, Emma was trying to create family bonds that didn't exist. Obligations that Venika had never agreed to accept. Venika stared at the message for a long time before deleting it without responding. Emma's baby would be born into a family that prioritized image over integrity, comfort over truth. That wasn't Venika's responsibility to fix or her tragedy to mourn. The next morning brought another call from Helen, this time barely coherent through tears. The baby came early, he's in the NICU, but he's going to be okay. Emma keeps asking for you. She says she needs her sister. I'm not her sister anymore. I'm the woman whose life she stole. Venika, please. A baby changes everything. This could be a fresh start for all of us. But that was exactly what Venika refused to accept. The idea that Emma's choices should be erased by motherhood, that her betrayal should be forgiven, because she'd produced new life to distract from the destruction she'd caused. Mom, I hope the baby is healthy. I hope he grows up surrounded by people who love him, but those people won't include me. You don't mean that. I absolutely mean that. Emma made her choice when she decided my husband was worth more than our relationship. I'm making mine now. The conversation ended with Helen's tears and Venika's resolve, 2 forces that had shaped their family dynamic for decades but would no longer determine its future. By evening, the hotel room felt too small for her restless energy. Venika walked the city streets until she found herself outside a small bookstore, its warm light spilling onto the sidewalk. Inside, she bought a notebook and a pen, then sat in a corner cafe until midnight, writing. She wrote about betrayal and truth, about the difference between forgiveness and enabling, about the courage it took to choose solitude over toxic family bonds. She wrote about the strange freedom that came with being the villain in someone else's story, about the peace of living without the constant management of other people's emotions. Most importantly, she wrote about the future, not the one that had been stolen from her, but the one she was building from nothing, brick by careful brick. When she finally returned to her hotel room, Venika felt lighter than she had in months. Tomorrow would bring more pressure to reconcile, more manipulation disguised as love, more attempts to make her responsible for Emma's happiness. But tonight she was simply a woman who had chosen truth over family, integrity over comfort, and her own life over the drama of people who had forfeited the right to her care. It was enough. More than enough, it was everything. Part 9. The divorce papers arrived on a Thursday morning, delivered to Marcus at her parents' house where he'd apparently taken up permanent residence. Venika knew this because Helen called within an hour, her voice shrill with panic. You can't be serious about this. Marcus is devastated. Emma's having complications from the stress. Of course Emma was having complications. Every inconvenience in Emma's life became a medical emergency. Every consequence of her actions transformed into someone else's responsibility. The papers are already filed, Mom. This isn't a negotiation. But the house. Your beautiful house? You're just going to throw it all away? Venika stood in her hotel room, looking out at the city skyline. She'd been living here for 3 weeks now, and the sterile efficiency of it felt like freedom compared to the suffocating warmth of family expectation. It was never my house. It was our house. And there is no our anymore. The real estate agent had been brutally honest about the market timing, but Venica didn't care about maximizing profit. She cared about cutting ties cleanly, completely. The house would sell below market value, but it would sell quickly. Marcus would get his half of the proceeds, and she would get her independence. Helen was still talking, her words blending into the familiar rhythm of guilt and manipulation. Emma keeps asking when you're coming to visit. She says the baby hasn't been moving as much since you stopped coming around. Even from a distance, Emma was trying to weaponize her pregnancy, to make Venica responsible for an unborn child's welfare. The manipulation was so transparent, it was almost insulting. Mom, I need you to hear something very clearly. I am not coming back. I am not reconciling with Emma. I am not playing happy families with my ex-husband and his pregnant girlfriend. That part of my life is over. She's not his girlfriend. She's what? His wife? His partner? The mother of his child? Venica's voice remained steady, despite the anger building behind it. She's the woman he was sleeping with while he was engaged to me. That's what she is. That's what she'll always be. The silence stretched between them, filled with everything Helen couldn't say. That she knew Venica was right, that the situation was indefensible, that choosing Emma meant losing Venica entirely. Your father wants to talk to you, Helen said finally, the fight draining from her voice. Tell Dad I love him. Tell him I'm building something better than what I lost. After hanging up, Venica sat in the growing darkness of her hotel room, feeling the strange peace that came with burning bridges completely. There would be no gradual reconciliation, no tentative rebuilding of relationships. She had chosen scorched earth, and it was surprisingly liberating. Her phone buzzed with a text from her lawyer. House showing went well. 3 offers expected by Monday. Another text followed immediately. This one, from an unknown number. This is Emma. Mom gave me your new number. I went into early labor last night. I'm okay, and so is the baby, but I wanted you to know. I keep hoping you'll want to meet your nephew when he arrives. Your nephew. Even now, even after everything, Emma was trying to create family bonds that didn't exist. Obligations that Venica had never agreed to accept. Venica stared at the message for a long time before deleting it without responding. Emma's baby would be born into a family that prioritized image over integrity, comfort over truth. That wasn't Venica's responsibility to fix or her tragedy to mourn. The next morning brought another call from Helen, this time barely coherent through tears. The baby came early. He's in the NICU, but he's going to be okay. Emma keeps asking for you. She says she needs her sister. I'm not her sister anymore. I'm the woman whose life she stole. Venica, please. A baby changes everything. This could be a fresh start for all of us. But that was exactly what Venica refused to accept. The idea that Emma's choices should be erased by motherhood, that her betrayal should be forgiven because she'd produced new life to distract from the destruction she'd caused. Mom, I hope the baby is healthy. I hope he grows up surrounded by people who love him, but those people won't include me. You don't mean that. I absolutely mean that. Emma made her choice when she decided my husband was worth more than our relationship. I'm making mine now. The conversation ended with Helen's tears and Venica's resolve, 2 forces that had shaped their family dynamic for decades but would no longer determine its future. By evening, the hotel room felt too small for her restless energy. Venica walked the city streets until she found herself outside a small bookstore, its warm light spilling onto the sidewalk. Inside, she bought a notebook and a pen, then sat in a corner cafe until midnight, writing. She wrote about betrayal and truth, about the difference between forgiveness and enabling, about the courage it took to choose solitude over toxic family bonds. She wrote about the strange freedom that came with being the villain in someone else's story, about the peace of living without the constant management of other people's emotions. Most importantly, she wrote about the future, not the one that had been stolen from her, but the one she was building from nothing, brick by careful brick. When she finally returned to her hotel room, Venica felt lighter than she had in months. Tomorrow would bring more pressure to reconcile, more manipulation disguised as love, more attempts to make her responsible for Emma's happiness. But tonight, she was simply a woman who had chosen truth over family, integrity over comfort, and her own life over the drama of people who had forfeited the right to her care. It was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Part 10. 6 months later, Venica stood in the doorway of her new apartment, watching movers arrange furniture she'd chosen entirely for herself. No compromises. No negotiations about style or placement. The space was smaller than the house she'd shared with Marcus, but it was wholly hers. Every corner, every decision, every quiet morning. The settlement had been finalized with brutal efficiency. Marcus had wanted to contest the terms, claiming emotional distress and extenuating circumstances, but his lawyer had advised against it. Adultery was still adultery, regardless of the pregnancy that had resulted from it. Venica's phone buzzed occasionally with updates from the family drama she'd left behind. Her cousin Jennifer, the only relative who'd supported her decision, served as an unwilling information conduit. Emma named the baby Marcus Jr., Jennifer had texted last week. Your mom thinks you should know in case you want to send a gift. Even in motherhood, Emma couldn't resist claiming Marcus completely, branding their child with his name as if to erase any doubt about where her loyalties lay. The presumption that Venica would celebrate this declaration was almost funny. The real surprise had come from Marcus himself, who'd shown up at her lawyer's office 3 weeks ago, apparently hoping for a private conversation. Her lawyer had refused the meeting, but Marcus had sent a letter instead, 4 pages of self-justification disguised as apology. He'd written about complicated emotions and, quote, unexpected connections, and, quote, never meaning for things to happen this way. He'd described Emma's pregnancy as a miracle that changed everything, and his love for Venica as, quote, real but different from what he'd discovered with Emma. The letter had been carefully crafted to present himself as a man torn between 2 loves, rather than someone who'd systematically deceived his fiancée for 8 months. He'd even suggested they could, quote, remain friends for the sake of family harmony. Venica had read it once, laughed bitterly, and shredded it. Marcus wanted absolution, not accountability. He wanted her to validate his narrative of romantic confusion, rather than acknowledge his capacity for calculated betrayal. Her new job at a nonprofit legal clinic had been a deliberate choice, meaningful work with people who had real problems, not manufactured drama. Her colleagues knew nothing about her family situation beyond the basics. Divorced, recently relocated, focused on building her career. The anonymity was intoxicating. No one expected her to manage relationships or smooth over tensions or forgive betrayals for the greater good. She was simply Venica, lawyer and advocate, woman building a life from her own choices. The evening ritual she'd developed involved cooking dinner for one, reading without interruption, and writing in the notebook that had become her most trusted companion. She documented her progress like a scientist recording experiments, noting which days felt hardest, which victories felt most significant, which moments brought unexpected peace. Tonight's entry began with a practical update. House sold. Final papers signed. No remaining financial ties. But it evolved into something deeper. Saw a couple arguing outside the grocery store today. The woman was crying, accusing the man of lying about something. He kept saying, it's not what it looks like, and, quote, you're overreacting. I watched her choose to believe him, watched her swallow her own intuition to preserve their relationship. I wanted to tell her that her instincts were probably right, that people who gaslight you about small things will gaslight you about big things. But mostly I felt grateful that I'm not her anymore. The phone rang as she was finishing the entry. Helen's name appeared on the screen, their first contact in over a month. Venica, I hope you'll listen before you hang up. The weariness in her mother's voice was new, stripped of the usual manipulative energy. I'm listening. Emma and Marcus broke up. She moved out of our house last week, took the baby to her friend's place in Portland. He's not handling it well. The news should have brought satisfaction, but Venica felt only distant curiosity. She'd wondered how long their relationship would survive without the excitement of secrecy and betrayal. I'm sorry to hear that, she said, and meant it. Not for Emma or Marcus, but for the baby who would grow up with parents who'd built their relationship on deception. Marcus has been asking about you. He wants to know if there's any chance. No. He thinks maybe now that Emma's out of the picture. Mom, Marcus didn't choose Emma over me. He chose deception over honesty, immediate gratification over commitment, drama over stability. Emma was just the vehicle. If it hadn't been her, it would have been someone else. The distinction seemed to surprise Helen, as if she'd never considered that character flaws might be more significant than specific circumstances. He's learned from his mistakes. Maybe, but that's his journey to make alone. And Emma, she's struggling. Single motherhood is harder than she expected. She keeps saying she made a terrible mistake. She made a series of deliberate choices. Now she's living with the consequences. You sound so cold. I sound healthy. For the first time in years, I sound healthy. After ending the call, Venica returned to her notebook. The family drama continues without me. Emma and Marcus discovered that relationships built on betrayal don't have solid foundations. Who could have predicted that? But here's what I've learned. My peace isn't dependent on their chaos ending. My happiness isn't contingent on their suffering. I'm building something entirely separate from their story, and that separation is the greatest gift I've ever given myself. She closed the notebook and prepared for bed in her quiet apartment, grateful for the solitude that had once terrified her and now felt like the most luxurious freedom imaginable. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.